Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so sorry for this technical glitch. So very little was known when we started our work almost 10 years ago, and we wanted to solve the basic questions of who is this wolf, why is this wolf different, and how does this wolf live? And we always had in mind, we want to inform conservation. That's the ultimate goal of all the data that we collect. So we worked on these three pillars: ecological data, understand how they live; phylogenetic data, who are these wolves; and then human-wolf relations, to understand, yes, what are the conflicts, what is the position of these wolves in the local communities, to really develop conservation action on the ground. So early explorers, they noted these morphologically different wolves, and they come in different colors. Usually they're these gray, sand grayish, reddish, like the Himalayas, the high Himalayas. There's also these black individuals, and we find black wolves across the whole Arctic, and this is usually because it's the black gene of dogs introgressed. So this is not uncommon. Wolves and dogs, they meet everywhere around the globe, and there is some genetic exchange. And the black individuals, they seem to have some positive effect also in the landscape. And these wolves are also, they also go by the name Tibetan wolf. Woolly wolf is often used by Indian researchers. And now we have decided on the Latin name for the moment on Canis lupus chanco. But what is the fact is that these wolves are evolutionarily and taxonomically unique wolves of the Asian high altitudes, no matter what we call them. They are a genetically unique lineage. So to give you an overview of the range of other lineages around, there has been a lot of changes also. So the Himalayan wolf is found in these light colored high altitudes, and the lighter colored is the higher elevations. In the south, we find the Indian wolf, Canis lupus palipes. This is an IUCN recognized wolf subspecies adapted to these arid landscapes in India. And otherwise, around to the northwest, to the northeast, and to the east, we actually just so far think we have the gray wheel wolf and the Holarctic gray wolf, Canis lupus lupus. In Mongolia, there used to be the notion that these wolves are different in Mongolia, but today the evidence says that these wolves are Holarctic gray wolves like in Europe, and the Mongolian wolves are not part of the Himalayan wolf clade. So there has been a lot of confusion around that. So this is really important to know. Also, to the east, we have the Arabian gray wolf, Canis lupus arabs, that is also a subspecies recognized by the IUCN. So these are also here, you can see the samples that we have, so the hard facts. The green dots are indicating samples that our team has collected or other people recently, researchers. And you can see in green the Himalayan wolf samples, and in blue the gray wolf samples. So you can see here in Kyrgyzstan, it's the gray wolf lineage, and also here to the north in China and in Mongolia, all the evidence is pointing towards the gray wolf lineage being found there. So this gives you we believe the Himalayan wolf is found across the entire Tibetan plateau, but we really don't know around the northern edges what is going on there. So why is this wolf relevant? So recent research is really showing predators maintain biodiversity in the ecosystem. They hold a very important position, and many of you have heard of this trophic ecology. They're top down, and we found when we remove important species from the ecosystem, slowly the ecosystem starts to degrade and other species will disappear over time. So it's very nice that the science is supporting the importance of these predators in the landscape, and to keep intact ecosystems, and thereby they can provide their services and are actually really important to humanity. So the Himalayan wolf is a top predator in a globally significant wilderness region. So this whole area, the Tibetan plateau, hosts the water resources for billions of people in Southeast Asia. So that is really important also in terms of ecological services. The Himalayan wolf keeps these ecosystems healthy and intact, along with snow leopards. So why is this research important that we're doing? As said, it has been overlooked by conservation, but what we're seeing on the ground is that these wolves are frequently killed. But we don't know anything about population size or trends. To date, There's no reliable numbers available, so we really need to work on this. The specific distribution range is not known. Another important topic to understand, and the final taxonomic classification is pending. Taxonomy takes a lot of time. It needs solid evidence. So I expect that this is going to take another while until this is really officially decided. But for now, we go with Canis lupus janco, with the strong possibility that it might be elevated to a species sometime. So quickly about the social life of these wolves. They live in small family units that we call a pack. But what we're finding is that wolf packs are really very comparable to a human family. There's a female adult, a male adult, and usually they roam around with their offspring of the year. Often an offspring or two from previous years stays with the pack and helps raising the young. So, and if we have social mammals, usually have very complex social behavior and thereby also a very complex cognition. So these animals are very intelligent. For those of you who have a dog, you probably have also learned your dog is really intelligent, and the wolves are probably even smarter. They have to survive, but there's also really complex social cognition among them in their behavior. And also Hennelly et al. In 2017, they've done an interesting study where they investigated the howling of these wolves. They compared the Himalayan wolves to the Indian wolves and the gray wolf, Holarctic gray wolves, and they really also could find differences in the howling of these wolves. So let's move on to the methods. This has been our team last year in the field. And so in the past, we've covered 3 study sites in Nepal, Humla. This is also where we are currently working again very extensively, Dolpa, and then Kanchenjunga Conservation Area. All of these are in the high Himalayas, but are very different landscapes. In Kanchenjunga, the wolves have been coming back in the recent decade, and the population probably now is really getting established, but the landscape is not as ideal as in the more trans-Himalayan habitats of Humla and Dolpa. I've also done work in on the Tibetan plateau of China in Dijing and Anhui. And yeah, this was interesting. So for the field work, we go on these long research expeditions to collect data. There's usually no roads in these landscapes, so we go by mules and just walking ourselves, and the mules carry the gear. And we do a lot of just wolf scat sample collection. So I always describe my profession as a professional wolf scat hunter, but the wolf scats give us a lot of insights. We can collect genetic information, but also dietary information. What have the wolves eaten? So it always starts with the wolf pooping, and then we take the sample, and the mules then carry bags of samples down to the lab. And we have a long-term collaboration with the Wild Genes Lab at RZSS in Scotland, and they have really helped us to make the most out of these genetic samples, because a lot of can go wrong in the process. It's also costly. So you want to ensure, if you do a genetic study, that everything is optimized. We also do prey counts, what is available to the wolves in the landscape, which prey species are around, in what amount. And also important are the small mammals like marmots that are abundant in the summer season only, and paikas as well. And we do a lot of social surveys to understand these interactions with between humans and wolves, and also all other wildlife. So just some insights here. To the upper right, you can see a wolf head and 4 paws. And we've learned that in China, it's believed that if you keep a wolf head and 4 paws in your house, it will bring you good luck in card games. And just also to give an impression, you have to collect every type of data that you find in the field. And to the left, you see a wolf hanging in a little monastery. So let's dive into the ecological findings in more detail. So we counted the prey abundance with distance sampling of livestock, but also wild prey, everything that we could find. And also we compared this to what the wolves have eaten, and this we understand through the microscopic diet analysis. For this, we collect the wolf scat, we wash it, so only the solid parts remain. And then we can identify the hair under the microscope. So different hair from different animals are very distinct. As you can see here to the right, the goat has a very different pattern than the blue sheep. And this is really insightful. Nowadays, this diet analysis is often also done through genetics. In my opinion, both approaches have pros and cons. So the microscopic is a more old school approach, but it also gives you a quantity. Maybe you lose some in the precision, whereas the genetic approach might have better precision in terms of species, but you don't know how much blue sheep versus mice. So you just know in this wolf scat, there is blue sheep and also mice, but you don't know the quantities. That's the downside of the genetics. We have done it with the microscope so far. So we can compare what the wolves have eaten in comparison to what is available in the landscape. And these are the results. Don't be overwhelmed. I will walk you right through it. So to the left, you see the relative prey biomass eaten. So what have the wolves eaten in Humla? You can see in green, they have eaten a lot of kyang. They have eaten a lot of marmot in blue, and in yellow also a lot of yak and some blue sheep. And what was to the right, this circle tells you what is the relative prey abundance available in the landscape to these wolves. And we find a lot of yaks were available to these wolves, also a lot of kyang, which is beautiful, and also horses and other domestics, and also some blue sheep. This allows us to combine these two data sets to calculate the Jacobs index, which tells us if the wolves select or avoid a prey species. And we can see here in this graph, the wolves, they clearly, especially in Humla, they select for wild prey species. They strongly select for Tibetan gazelle. They also select for kyang and for blue sheep. So there's a pattern of preferring wild prey. When we look at Dolpa, a very similar picture emerges. In Dolpa, there was really a lot of yaks available in the landscape. The wolves have also eaten a lot of yaks, and but in Dolpa, unfortunately, the wild prey population was not so strong when we were there. Looking at the Jacobs index, again, we can see strong selection for Tibetan gazelle and also for blue sheep, a little bit also for yaks, but this is probably not surprising if we look at the data of what was available to the wolves in the landscape. But again, the pattern of wild prey selected over domestics. Similar picture emerges in Kanchenjunga. There was not so much data from KCA, but again, blue sheep is selected, a little bit horses and mules. In China, on the Tibetan plateau in Qinghai, it was the same. Tibetan gazelle strongly selected. White-lipped deer is not found, to my knowledge, in Nepal, is probably too large of an ungulate for the wolves to frequently prey on it. And interestingly here also, they selected probably Tibetan gazelle also much over blue sheep. And again, the same in Dijing. So there is a pattern emerging here, and this is that there's this trend that the wolves select wild over domestic prey species. This is really astonishing if we also consider the livestock versus prey availability ratios in the landscape. So for example, in Humla, there was 3.5 times the amount of domestics available to the wolves compared to wild prey. If you look at Dolpa, that was almost 42 times the amount of wild prey available for the wolves, of domestic prey available for the wolves in the landscape compared to wild prey. I mean, and usually domestics are also easy for the wolves to take. So they are definitely selecting for Tibetan gazelle. This makes sense. The Tibetan gazelle is an ungulate, smaller sized, probably a good size for the wolves to take. And what we also know is that, is that the small mammals are very important supplementary food resources for these wolves, especially also marmots and hare and the woolly hare. But we don't know what happens in winter. So this has yet to be done, how is the diet changing between summer and winter when especially the marmots are sleeping? So yes, so what can we conclude for conservation action from these findings? We need to ensure intact wild prey populations, because if they are there, the wolves will go for it. We need to manage livestock numbers, and especially also we need to decrease the livestock vulnerability, improve their protection, make livestock safer. So this brings us to the evolutionary history, the so-called phylogeny of these wolves. What is their position in the tree of life? And we find in a nutshell that the Himalayan wolf is distinct, at least based on 4 genomic regions that we have checked so far. And here you see a phylogenetic tree based on full mitochondrial DNA. And in blue, you see what we call the Holarctic gray wolf complex, and in green, the Himalayan wolf. So the Holarctic gray wolf complex comprises all the subspecies of gray wolves that are found in the Northern Hemisphere, and they also include domestic dogs. And the Himalayan wolves, they have diverged as an independent sister clade, as an independent sister lineage from the ancestors of modern wolves and dogs. Around 700,000 years ago, they became an independent sister lineage. At that time, modern wolves were not around, and also no dogs. So which are the markers that are different? One of them is the cytochrome B. This is a standard gene on the mitochondrial DNA that is often used to check for species. And then we find these haplotypes. And here in this network to the right, you can see the Holarctic gray wolf in yellow. It comprises also domestic dogs. They form one clade. Then in green, the Himalayan wolf. We found 2 haplotypes for the cytochrome B gene. And as a comparison, in red, the African wolf to the right. The African wolf is interesting, and I'm using it as a comparison because the African wolf has similarly recently been realized that it's a different wolf lineage that deserves taxonomic recognition, and it's different at a very similar genetic level. And the African wolf, it has already been the subject of more researches, and more researchers are working on African wolves, but they have been classified as a species recently. So we need taxonomic consistency within canids, and so I think it's interesting to orient the taxonomy of the Himalayan wolves at what is being done with the African wolves. Then also the D-loop is another gene on the mitochondrial DNA. Similar picture emerges. On the top, the Himalayan wolf in green, then the Holarctic gray wolf complex with dogs and wolves, and again to the lower right, the African wolf in red. Then on the X and the Y chromosome, we looked at the zinc finger protein coding gene. And interestingly, we found on the X chromosome that the Himalayan wolf in green again and the African wolf, they share a haplotype. So they have the same haplotype, the same genes there, but on the Y chromosome, the African wolf has a different haplotype, the Himalayan wolf has a different haplotype, and then the Holarctic gray wolf has its own haplotype, and golden jackal just also again as a comparison. And so a little bit more about this name clarification. So different names have been used in the past. We currently now go with Canis lupus janko, but there has also been Canis lupus, just Canis lupus laniger, Canis lupus janko Himalayan haplotype, or in my earlier works, I've used Canis lupus himalayensis because I thought it was straightforward, because Canis lupus janko has been used in the past for wolves in Mongolia. And as said, wolves in Mongolia are not part of this Himalayan wolf lineage. So that is causing a little bit of confusion, but taxonomy has very specific rules, and Canis lupus janko is the current valid name. So a really important question is how to cope with the low oxygen levels at high altitudes. So there's around half the size of oxygen available to mammals and plants, to everyone, in these heights where these wolves live. And this is a big challenge to an organism. So different mammals have chosen a very similar approach, genetic adaptation. Tibetan people have a genetic adaptation for this, Tibetan Mastiff dogs as well, and they probably have gotten the good genes for high altitude adaptation from breeding with the wolves, and the Himalayan wolves have this high altitude adaptation in their genetics. So we developed a protocol together with wild genes based on the study by Zhang et al. In 2014. We looked at 4 functional hypoxia-related SNPs. SNPs are short gene regions on the nuclear DNA. And you don't have to understand this, but just again, look at the color pattern. You see here in the top rows in Nepal and Tibet, China, this green to the left, there's some nice colors. So there's different alleles on these 4 genes. When you go down, when you start looking down, you see it's just green and yellow. So for the gray wolves, these genes have the same alleles, but Himalayan wolves have different alleles on most of these hypoxia-related genes. So it's a very clear pattern here as well, that they have this adaptation. And interestingly, in Kyrgyzstan and also in Qinghai, we have some admixture going on. And in Kyrgyzstan, it's continuous in terms of high altitude habitats. And it seems the Kyrgyz wolves that we've tested, they are gray wolves based on most of the genetic markers, but they have this hypoxia adaptation integressed, and this makes sense. Evolution has done its job. And then another genetic marker that we used is microsatellites. They are also really good to distinguish among individuals. And again, the same picture emerges. In green, we have the Himalayan wolf. They form a distinct clade different from the African wolf, and the gray wolf from Mongolia, Europe, and Nepal, and dogs from Nepal. And we see gray wolves in Kyrgyzstan, they are a little bit in between. So there's some gene flow happening. But with most canids, and especially with wolves, the species boundaries, they're just not as clear cut as we think. In the landscape, there's a gradient, which makes it difficult for taxonomy, but I think exciting from an evolutionary perspective. So we can also calculate a divergence time estimate. So when did these wolves diverge as an independent sister clade? And here what our research finds is somewhere around 700,000 years ago. This is also in the same ballpark that other studies have found. Some say it's 800,000 years ago, some say it's 590,000 years ago, but we're roughly in the same. Definitely they are basal to the Holarctic gray wolf complex. So this brings us to the conservation implications that we have been drawing from all this so far. Taxonomic classification is basis for conservation. So I didn't start out as a geneticist at all, but I realized that these wolves, first of all, they need to be described taxonomically so that we can do more research and especially do conservation. So that's why I did a lot of genetics work to solve this problem, because the taxonomic classification is also the basis for the conservation status, for example, for an IUCN red listing. And I think as practitioners and conservationists, we all know we orient ourselves at the IUCN red list, and also politicians. And so these lists are important, and taxonomy is important for conservation management on the ground. But also all these 3 pillars of data, they really are feeding into our recommendations and our actions for conservation. So back to the human-wolf relations. We talked to a lot of people, especially Norris, and it's been really interesting what we found. Generally, we find wolves or canids or dogs are less respected in the local culture and religion if we compare that to cats and also the snow leopard. Of course, the snow leopard has received decades of conservation action, and people are much more aware. And we also find that the wolves, not surprisingly, are killed in retaliation for depredation. Guns are being used, leg traps are being used. And also there are body parts are used for trade and medicine. There's a lot of trade going on across the border to China. There's a big demand there. And we also found, very sadly, in Dolpa, this is this picture to the right, that local people, they go to the denning site, that is where the wolves raise their pups when they're young. They make a fire at the entrance of the cave, and through this action, they, of course, they kill the entire litter, which is the entire next generation of this pack. So conflict is not surprising. If we look at this landscape, yaks are usually moved into this landscape relatively quickly from one day to the next. Before there was maybe some wild prey available. And so it's definitely important to work on these mitigation actions. So what can we do? We have to optimize livestock protection. There's still, I think, I mean, the local people are doing an outstanding job. They know what they're doing, but I think there's still a lot of things that can be improved to help them make it more effective, also just to help them, to support them, because it's a challenging task in these ecosystems, make a livelihood. And so corals are really important at night, and guardian dogs are used a lot across different regions in the world. We haven't really done so much with guarding dogs yet, because there's also the risk that the dogs are not kept properly and then become feral and then themselves predate on wild prey and maybe also domestics. So this has to be well managed, and local people didn't express that much the want to use guarding dogs. They preferred so far other options. But in other regions, guarding dogs have been very successful. Then we need to manage livestock numbers and ensure intact wild prey populations, and ideally also just refuges where the wild prey populations can stay and livestock is not moving into the valleys, because this is usually happening really quickly and the wild prey has to leave, and maybe the wolves have their pups in this valley and suddenly there's all these yaks with their calves. So there's some tricky situations at certain times in the year. And also what is just important is just keep working on conservation awareness. This is a very long-term endeavor to make everyone realize these animals are important. They're globally significant. The wolves are important, but all the other wild prey up there as well, as are the local people and their culture and traditions. And we really pushed a lot for community conservation, make the local people own their ecosystem, be proud of their animals, and really, in the long term, do the conservation themselves. And we are just kind of their assistants. And for our souls, a little video of the wolf pups that we observed in Tolpa. We were just by coincidence stumbled across this wolf pack with pups. And of course, this is always very exciting because usually we only see scats. Yeah. And then, to wrap this up, I think the Himalayan wolf is an ambassador for ecosystem conservation in these high altitude habitats. What we have learned over the years in our project is really that we need to push for ecosystem conservation, the whole ecosystem, all the wild animals in it, and the single species conservation approach is outdated. But I think charismatic animals, they can be ambassadors for conserving this holistic approach. And also some just advice from the field. I mean, we all naturally probably do this, but keep your eyes open for everything that you can find or see. If you're studying one thing, don't just focus on that, but be alert to everything around. We have constantly, Norris and myself, we've constantly found exciting things about birds and other updates and mammals. And last year, we found we could document Pallas cat and lynx and snow leopards and polecat in Humla. So a lot of exciting findings also, which is maybe not your target species or your focus of your research. So always keep your eyes open and take your notebook and just take notes of everything that you find. You never know what comes out of it. So with this, I want to thank you so much for your attention and your interest. You can go to the website HimalayanWolfsProject.org for more information. We also have Facebook and Instagram, and come follow us. And I also want to acknowledge all the important people. My long-term research partner, Norris Kusi, is really important, and Sabita Gurung, who has recently joined our team and is doing a wonderful job. And then my supervisors and a lot of people have been really important to make all of this possible. And we try to bring the information that we find out. And yeah, thank you. So any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we would like to move to discussion session. I can see some of the questions over chat box. Tulsi, he is very thankful to your presentation and he want to ask question. I would like to ask the reason for selecting king as a main prey species in Humla, but not in Dolpa.
So in Dolpa, there's no kyang. We maybe lose the connection.
Question.
I think you're breaking up, at least for me. Maybe, I don't know if somebody else can hear Saraswati. Maybe I can read the question myself. Why were wild species selected as preferred prey when domestic animals were abundant? So that is a really good question. I think there is wolves and wild animals often usually avoid humans, and this is why they're still around. And so wolves really have a smart avoidance of humans, and livestock is associated with humans, and also usually domestics are protected to some extent. So there's also a hurdle. And I think there's probably a genuine preference for wild prey because this is what they have evolved with. Yeah, and then so the other question by Narayan is, thank you for your presentation. How can we distinguish scat of wolf and snow leopard? Do you think wolf predates the Himalayan bear? Oh, that's a good question. I don't think that wolves will, no, they will probably, in most cases, I'm sure there can be a crazy video found from somewhere in the world where wolves do something to a bear, but generally no. I think the brown bears found high up there, they are very big, I think, and the wolves, no, they have other prey available. How can we distinguish a scat of wolf and snow leopard? So it takes practice, and I always say the scent, go down and have a smell, but also the form. So a wolf scat is tapered in the end, that's very classic, and scats, they just end round. They have not this tapered end. There's also, I think we have some visuals for that. So drop me an email or something and I can send you some resources if you want to know more about that. So the next question that I can see is, what is the minimum habitat requirement for the species? And what are the conservation threats to this species in Nepal, Himalaya? So the habitat requirements, I guess you mean in terms of habitat size. So we don't know. There has been some studies, but I think it ranges a lot. So it really depends on the prey availability. And for gray wolves, we know it can range from 50 square kilometers to 1,000 square kilometers. I think for these wolves, it's somewhere in the range of 200, 300 square kilometers. But we have seen that the habitat in Dolpa, the prey abundance, and for example, Humla is very different. So really it comes down to prey abundance in the landscape. And what are the conservation threats to the species in the Himalayas? It's killing for retaliation and for trade, I think, yes. So studies showed, next question is, studies showed the interbreeding between dog and gray wolf. Do you think this may be a threat to the Himalayan wolf? So hybridization, interbreeding between dogs and wolves has probably ever since occurred, and with increasing dog numbers in these habitats is only going to be increasing. There have been a lot of studies looking at this also in Europe because it is a big conservation management topic. There is a study by Henley et al. That documents interbreeding between a wolf, a Himalayan wolf, and a dog in Ladakh. So it definitely happens. In China, in my fieldwork in China, I saw a lot of feral dogs in the landscape, much more dogs compared to wolves. And I think there the dogs have almost taken over the ecological role of the wolves in many parts. And there's probably definitely a lot of hybridization going on. It is a conservation concern. But we have currently, there's more basic questions that we need to solve to conserve these wolves. And this will be an important one once we've solved the basics. So Ramesh, to everyone, people in Khumbu region said to me that the Himalayan wolves came with yaks when they were bought from Tibet in 2014. Do you think that's possible? And also people say there were wolves in the past and then they vanished in between and now they have come up quite fast. So what could be the reason for that is so they were gone most likely because of intense pressure, depredation pressure, not depredation, killing pressure from humans because of probably depredation and conflict. So that's probably why they were vanished. They probably come back really quickly because wolves are adaptive and they're generalists and they have survived despite all this killing across the globe. And the habitat is continuous with the Tibetan plateau, also in Khumbu, in all these northern regions of Nepal. The habitat is continuous, so the wolves have an easy go coming from Tibet to the south and recolonizing these habitats. I think, have the wolves come with the yaks that were brought in Tibet in 2014? Could be, but doesn't have to be. I mean, the wolves, they can follow prey, but I think it would have been the situation that no other wild prey is available. Otherwise, I think it's more of a local story that might be half true. It can be true, but it depends. So the next question is, can you please throw some more light on their winter huntings? I wish we could, and maybe somebody can do this study. The problem with the winter studies is that these habitats are hard to reach, and yeah, it's hard to cross the passes to go into these habitats, but we are really interested to learn about this, and hopefully one of us or one of you can tackle this important question. Also, do they stay in these habitats? Do they move to lower elevations? There's not that much snow on the Tibetan plateau, so I think they stay up there and basically follow their prey species. And then I see another question. Snow leopard conservation and Himalayan wolf conservation taken simultaneously. Which one needs more scientific focus in context of Nepal? Can gender mainstreaming in community-based conservation can aid to its conservation in context of Nepal? Yes, I think equalizing gender is really important for all kinds of conservation, because if people are happy, they are in a much better position to conserve their nature around, and people usually love their ecosystems around and they want to conserve it, or they want it to be healthy to some extent, but usually it's livelihood issues or other social issues like equality. So snow leopard conservation and Himalayan wolf conservation in Nepal, I think it can take in simultaneously, and that's what we are doing in our project now. We really think, why not just aim to conserve all the conflict-causing predators with these actions that we're doing. Which one needs more scientific focus in the context of Nepal? I think all needs scientific focus, but there has been much more studies on snow leopards. I think snow leopards are very well studied. There's multiple big NGOs working for snow leopard conservation. So I really think in the context of Nepal and also the general region that currently wolves should have the priority, because a lot of things are just ongoing on snow leopards. But I think yeah, we should all just go into this conserve the ecosystem, conserve the predator guild as a whole. And then the next question is, any insights on the movement ecology of Himalayan wolves in Nepal? What about the corridors and connectivity with other districts of Nepal? I think there's some PhDs working on this topic now, and hopefully we can get some answers in the future, but it might take a little bit of time. I think that's the last question that I can see so far.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm really sorry for the technical disturbance. I could not see those questions. Now we like to go to the end of the program, and I would like to request Dr. Dinesh Raj Bozu, Secretary of Resources Himalaya Foundation, to give a vote of thanks to Dr. Geraldine Warren and all the participants.
Thank you, Saraswati, for inviting me to propose vote of thanks to this lady, a wildlife biologist, whose name I have been hearing for a long, long time. And today you gave us this opportunity to listen to her wonderful work. Dr. Geraldine Waham. At the outset, on behalf of Resources Himalaya and environmental graduates in Himalaya, I would like to propose a warm vote of thanks for this wonderful talk to Dr. Warham.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Dhanyavad.
It was a wonderful talk. I was just wondering how you would be covering such a huge dimension of this very beautiful. Often we used to call it a clever animal, the wolf. Its habitat, its evolutionary lineage, and even the methodology you described, it was wonderful. I'm sure all the participants, they were much enlightened by this talk. It has been a wonderful lecture for our wildlife students as well here in Nepal. This project has brought us a huge knowledge, not only on the ecology of this wonderful creature, but also its evolutionary biological aspect. And you have shown us, you have shown to our researchers new avenues for further research. Thank you so much for showing us this new dimension. I very much appreciate and would like to borrow your word, the ambassador for ecosystem conservation. Definitely these Himalayan wolves could be the best ambassadors for ecosystem conservation. You have rightly pointed out the species level conservation has become almost a history now. The conservation now has to be at ecosystem level. And for this wonderful creature, Himalayan wolf could be the best. So he's our ambassador. And I was just wondering how this creature could hunt at that altitude, where, as you have mentioned, the oxygen level is just half that we have at sea level. Quite often I used to visit there. I also did a lot of work at high altitude. And I have experiences like even that time, even a pair of your shoes or a jacket would be so heavy for you. That would be heavy for you because you have such a low level of oxygen at that level. So I was mesmerized, and I was so much enlightened to know how you studied and found some 4 functional hypoxia. You have done your research even at that level. It was wonderful, Dr. Warham. I hope the participants, especially the young participants, the young researchers from Nepal, could understood you, that the research level of the research at this level, at this depth, this is possible only when you love research. This is possible only when you have some kind of enlightenment. This is possible when you do some dhyan for the sake of conservation. When you do some dhyan, the meditation for the animal like the Himalayan wolf. Without meditation, without dhyan, without your seriousness, this is just impossible to get the knowledge at this level. So we are really very much thankful to you, Dr. Warham, for your talk. And also at this moment, I would like to recall how difficult time we had to get a permission for this work from the government of Nepal. It took us 16 months, 16 months. I remember Dr. Kamal Adhikari and Naresh, who really had to work so hard to get permission from the department. And at times, out of our frustration, we wanted to give it up. But because of you, Geraldine, time and again, you used to mobilize us, motivate us, encourage us, inspire us, and we continue to work on to get that permission. I think that 16 months of hard works to get the permission proved to be very worthy today.
Thank you so much. I know.
So once again, I'm very happy to be, the Resources Himalayan Foundation and EGS is very happy to host today's talk. And once again, on behalf of the foundation, on behalf of EGS, and on behalf of all the participants, I would like to extend our warmest thanks to you. Thank you very much, Dr. Geraldine Warham. Thank you so much.
Dhanyavad. Thank you so much, Dinesh sir. And thank you also for all your support to our work over all these years. We really appreciate it, and we try to do the best out of it.